Welcome back to Joy News Prime. Let's get to our stories now. John Mahama has filed a new processes in court seeking the leave of the court to reopen his case and then subpoena Jane Mensah to testify in a new 37-page document filed at the Supreme Court moments after the court overruled its objection against the decision of the EC chairperson not to testify. John Mahama says he believed Jane Mensah would be testifying under oath until she decided otherwise. Earlier, the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, upheld the application by the first and second respondents not to call any witnesses in the ongoing election petition hearing. The decision by the Apex Court follows oral arguments made by the lawyers for the Electoral Commission and President Akufo-Addo that their clients cannot be compelled to testify. After the petitioner closed his case in court, lawyers for the EC, to the surprise of many, announced that Madam Jane Mensah will not testify and that they also closing their case, prompting an objection from lawyers from Mr. Mahama. Kwekwa Sante will join us shortly for details on this new application filed in court. But first, here's what happened in court today.
The Supreme Court, in its ruling, framed the issue before it for determination as whether or not respondents can be compelled to give evidence. The court held that witness statements do not constitute evidence until the witness enters the box and takes the oath to indicate reliance on it. This is against the background that Mr. Chachuchikata had argued that by filing a witness statement, the EC chairperson had elected to give testimony. Moreover, the Supreme Court, in its unanimous ruling, averred that the positions in affidavits in opposition to interrogatories cannot make respondents compellable. The EC, in its affidavit in opposition to an earlier demand by the petitioner to serve interrogatories, stated that those questions could be asked during cross-examination.
The law is therefore settled that a party will not be compelled to enter the witness box and testify in support of his or her case. It is a risk parties who decline to give evidence take, knowing perfectly well that the court will be left with no option but to proceed with the available evidence before it. Counsel for the petitioner has strongly submitted to us that we should not apply the Society of Law's case to the peculiar facts of this petition because the first respondent, being a constitutional body with defined responsibilities, must be brought before this court to be cross-examined as a way of accounting to the people of this country for its stewardship. The Society of Law's case, like this petition, also deals with witnesses who have served witness statements and have decided not to give evidence to be cross-examined. We are mandated to state that our jurisdiction invoked in this election petition is a limited jurisdiction clearly circumscribed by law. We do not intend to extend our mandate beyond what the law requires of us in such petitions brought under Article 64, Clause 1, challenging the validity of the election of a president. Simply put, we are not convinced and will not yield to the invitation being extended to us by counsel for the petitioner to order the respondent to enter the witness box to be cross-examined. Accordingly, we hereby overrule the objection raised by counsel for the petitioner against the decision of the respondents declining to adduce evidence in this petition.
According to the court, the petitioner's case should stand or fail based on the strength of his case and not the weakness of case of the respondents, if at all. So the Supreme Court is expected to sit again on the 18th of February 2021. This will be after all the parties involved in this election petition have filed their final written addresses. And these final written addresses is sort of the conclusion of the case for all the parties to present their thoughts to the court before the court sets a date to render judgment. But of course, the petitioner's lawyers, Mr. Chachuchikata and Tony Later, have served notice that they will be filing for a review of this case that the court just disposed of, and also that I will be filing an application to subpoena the chairperson of the Electoral Commission to answer some questions. They have been at pain to explain that they are not trying to shift the burden of proof onto the Electoral Commission, but they are saying that as the constitutionally mandated body to organize the election and the chairperson being the returning officer of the election, it is important that she takes the box to answer certain questions. And so when they file these new applications, the court will deal with them before 17th, when they are all supposed to file their written addresses before the court sets a date for judgment. Meanwhile, Marietta Brew Apiapon, a spokesperson for the petitioner, expressed surprise at the court's ruling, describing the arguments of the respondents as wishy-washy.
On Monday, you heard the superior, compelling arguments by Mr. Chikata. And of course, you heard the wishy-washy, insipid arguments by the respondents. Nevertheless, the courts have ruled in favor of the respondents, saying that they do not agree with us, that even though this is the EC, a constitutional body, the same principles that are applicable to ordinary people should be applicable to the Electoral Commission, and therefore they were upholding their request not to mount the witness box.
But Kojo Ponkroma, a spokesman for the respondents, say if the petitioner is seeking accountability, then he must use other means other than the court.
The third point that the Supreme Court has made today, that it has heard all of these arguments about she holds a constitutional office, the EC is a constitutional creature, and therefore there must be accountability. You remember that even for us speaking to you last week, we said if you want accountability, let's all go to Parliament, whether it's Public Accounts Committee or a parliamentary inquiry or something. But when you come and you apply to the court under some specific rules, you don't fail to meet that standard and then resort to that general argument. The court has said something about it, and I think we need to take note of it.
Let's get on to Zoom and speak with Kweku Asante, my colleague who joins us now. Kweku, what time was this process filed in court, and what are the legal issues raised by the petitioner seeking to reopen his case?
Right, Aisha. So it's very interesting to note that the judgment of the court was rendered around 9:45 a.m. thereabout. By 9:50 a.m., the judgment of the court had been rendered. And as at 11:20 a.m., that is just less than 2 hours later, the petitioner had filed an application to the court to grant it leave to, as it were, amend, not necessarily amend, but reopen his case and be able to subpoena the Electoral Commission to come and answer questions. And among other things, the application that was filed in court today recounts all that has happened in court thus far, and also attaches some processes that have been filed and the rulings given. Mr. Mohammed's affidavit in opposition avers that since the chair is not willing, the chair of the Electoral Commission is not willing to avail herself, he is directing his counsel to use his subpoena powers to use CF47 to compel her to attend to court and answer some questions. So according to John Mohammed's lawyers, the main reason why they want to reopen the case is to subpoena the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Madam Jane Mensah, and also that the subpoena documentation is ready. And so as soon as the court grants it leave to reopen this case, they will serve those subpoena documents on the Electoral Commission. The petitioner is also saying that it will be in the interest of justice and fairness, and for there to be a fair trial, for the court to allow him to reopen his case, because they are saying that a couple of things that happened in court took them by surprise, and so they could not, or they were unable to advance certain arguments and certain evidence in court. And so if the Electoral Commission is electing not to testify now, then they have to reopen their case and subpoena her as they use the court's power to compel witnesses to appear before it and answer questions. And so if they do that, we'll be expecting that Jane Mensah will, for instance, have to testify to what transpired between her and what has become a bone of contention between some of the witnesses who have already appeared before court. Roger Metelnunu, for instance, arguing and claiming that the Electoral Commissioner asked there to go and see the petitioner, John Dramani Mahama, and explain certain things to her. And in his absence, the Electoral Commissioner declared the results. And so all these questions are the averments in the affidavits in support of the application which have been lodged at the court today. And so the court is expected to hear this motion on Monday at 9 and decide on whether or not they will allow the petitioner reopen his case and subpoena the Electoral Commissioner.
That was my colleague Kweku Asante. So on Monday, the Supreme Court will be sitting on this matter. Kweku Asante will be on that beat, and we'll be hearing what the Supreme Court judges have to say on this. We'll take a break on Joy News Prime. We'll be back with more. Welcome back to Journey's Prime. To the rest of our stories, Minister Designate for Defense Dominic Nitiwul says he disagrees with the view that the military has failed in the fight against Galamsey. The Defense Minister Designate, who took his turn before the Appointments Committee of Parliament, said the military had been withdrawn because they had achieved the purpose for which they were deployed, arguing that the strategy was not to permanently keep them in the forest.
I don't agree when you say that the military has failed us in the fight against Galamsey. I think that you have the experience because you were Minister for Lands and Forestry before. You were environment, and you know the extent to which Galamsey had almost consumed this country shortly before you left office. And the military stepped in to do what they needed to do. Last year, January, I felt that the military had achieved what they were asked to achieve. That's what I asked them to move out. Like you stated before yesterday, Galamsey has been with us for a long time, but it is the nature of the current system where we go and use excavators to destroy our water bodies, to destroy the environment that is posing the problem. But for our local people who go and use cutlasses and hoes to just go and collect some small minerals, I don't think that should have been a problem for us. We don't want also to keep your military in the forest. Then you are not helping the military, you are not helping the people of Ghana. You want them to do a surgical operation and come out, And so if there is a need to do a surgical operation for the military in terms of what the president has said, because he said, let's have a conversation on Galamsey. So if there's a need to do a surgical operation, the military will do a surgical operation and come on. But I am not in favor of keeping the military in the forest for a very long time to fight the Galamsey activities. I think that's not the best way to go. And I think that the nation will support me on that call.
Minister Designate for Defense also disclosed that a probe has been launched into a Joy News report highlighting how the military was protecting a mining firm that was degrading the environment in the Manso Forest Reserve. He assured that those involved will be punished if found culpable.
I have caused investigation into this immediately because, like I said, on 31st January 2020, I issued a cabinet directive to the armed forces that no member of the armed forces is expected to be seen in any forest area except for 2 areas. And if anybody is doing that, it's doing in contravention of the government directive. And so I've asked that they should investigate this and bring me the report. The Chief of Army Staff has given his response. The GOC, General Commanding Officer, has given his response. And the investigation is ongoing. We'll put all the pieces together. And I can assure you, I've said it before, if anybody is found guilty, that person will be punished. And it doesn't matter who is minister. That's how it's supposed to be.
He's also dismissed claims of protocol recruitment into the army. He says he's prepared upon any evidence to launch investigations into any misconduct by any military personnel in the recruitment and selection process into the military. The Minister Designate was responding to concerns about alleged dubious recruitment into the Ghana Armed Forces.
You appeared before a similar committee in the 7th Parliament, and you gave the following assurance regarding recruitment or enlistment into the Ghana Armed Forces. Regarding challenges associated with enlistment into the Ghana Armed Forces and the apparent existence of ethnic imbalance in the forces, the nominee stated that although he was not fully aware of the causes of such perception of imbalance, he promised to review and restructure the recruitment process to ensure that the inherent challenges regarding regional and ethnic balance are addressed in accordance with the law. He informed the committee that already the military command had introduced an online recruitment process, emphasis mine, online recruitment process, which he believes will help to resolve some of the challenges associated with the process, since it will reduce the human interface in the initial selection process. Now, reports have suggested that since you became minister, over 1,700 people have been recruited into the Ghana Armed Forces under very dubious circumstances. What's your response to that?
Mr. Chairman, like I said before, in 2017, the armed forces advertised for people to be recruited. over 10,000, in fact, close to 20,000 young men and women, recruitment, not enlistment, applied. The selectors went onto the field and selected over 5,000 qualified members. Then they came down this body selection and selected over 4,000 qualified members. As we see today, the armed forces have not been able to absorb all of them because of lack of training space. And so I think that that assertion is not true at all. The armed forces hasn't recruited anybody outside this field.
Away from Parliament, project coordinator of the Mental Health Society of Ghana, Esinamdra, has said the COVID-19 is the now leading cause of mental health disorders in Ghana. She further explains frontline workers are even at a higher risk of developing mental health disorders as a result of their continuous contact with patients infected with the virus.
In the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has become one of the leading causes of mental health conditions, partly due to the disease experience, social distancing, stigma, discrimination, and job losses. In Ghana, which is one of the countries that have been affected by the pandemic, healthcare workers, patients with COVID-19, children, women, youth, and the elderly are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorders, anxiety, increased levels of depression, distress, insomnia, suicidal tendencies, and high rates of substance use disorders, among others. In Ghana, evidence suggests that even frontline healthcare workers who were directly involved in the collection of samples, diagnosis, treatment, and care of patients during the outbreak are also at higher risk of developing psychological distress and mental health symptoms. Anxiety, distress, depression, fear, and
Meanwhile, COVID-19 project officer for the Ghana Federation of Disability Organization, Christopher Agbega, says persons with disabilities are being gravely affected by the virus. In an interview with Joy News, he tells us depression is the most common mental health effect of the virus on persons with disabilities.
Depression has been the major psychosocial complication that has arisen due to the virus or the pandemic. And depression doesn't just happen. It happens when, there is fear, there is anxiety, there are, some sort of, these kinds of complications that arise from uncertainties. Because we live in a time where this pandemic has really brought us a lot of uncertainties. We don't even know, a lot of persons with disabilities don't even know how long they can deal with living with these PPs or adhering to these laid down protocols, the loss of family, or the loss of their jobs. And so depression has been the main thing. We've had some people who also with already existing mental health complications have had heightened levels of it. Last year, and I think it is still in the airwaves, that hydroxychloroquine is the drug that cures the virus. But you see, amongst persons with autoimmune condition, hydroxychloroquine is a medication that they take daily. So last year, when it was said that this particular medication actually heals you from the virus, and the pharmacies increased the prices, you can imagine the complication it had amongst persons with autoimmune and neurological conditions, because this is medication they take daily. So there's an amount of money they even have to struggle to get to buy these medications. What then do they do?
And as I wrap up the bulletin tonight, my name is Aisha Ibrahim. Many thanks for watching. For more news, log on to myjoyonline.com. We have all the updates for you. Up next is PM Express Business Edition. We're talking about COVID-19 and businesses. How are we going to be managing ourselves in this dire moment? Stay tuned in on the Joy News channel.